The bottle of gin, mate. I might crack it tonight.
Oh yeah, no, it's a big night, that's for sure. It's not very often you do 100 of anything. Hey everyone, welcome to Talking Landscape Photography and episode number 100. Absolutely amazing to make it this far and have all of you joining us tonight. And just, I guess, celebrating what I don't know what it is that we've created, but a bit of a regular catch up with a whole bunch of amazing photographers. And speaking of amazing photographers, obviously I've got Paul Hoelen and Nick Monk here with me at the moment. Guys, how are you?
Oh, it's very kind of you, Luke. Very kind, and yes, happy 100th episode. We've been having a chat before the show, and Luke's chastised me about my hiking shirt, and he's put on a nice, beautiful shirt for the occasion. So I apologise that I didn't get dressed up. Like Paul suggests he's had a haircut.
Just had a haircut, especially.
Oh, look at that! And why
Great
have
for the
you got a cap
hairdressers. Design a beard. Yeah.
Looking very swish indeed, and looking forward to tonight. It should be an interesting show full of some guests and discussions and all sorts of really cool things. So yeah, what about you, Paul?
Nice.
You've been well.
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge both of you guys and all of us, I think, for the time and commitment and the intention behind this show. Like we literally started it. Luke just worked out 951 days, was it, Luke?
Yeah, 900 odd days. Yeah, so it's quite a while since it started off.
We've said it before, but it was literally COVID just hit. We all were heading into lockdown, and we were like, geez, we're noticing some of our friends, and that sense of isolation and the love of what we do and the landscape was getting sort of taken away from us. And Luke and I had a big chat, and we're like, well, what can we do? What can we do to support the community and keep that connection alive and celebrate what we do and travel virtually and engage with other people? And what we do, the landscape was getting sort of taken away from us. And I think, Douwe, you might have YouTube on, Dex.
It's all good.
So, yeah, and it literally, we just set out for 6 episodes. We said, we'll give it a go for 6 episodes. Luke and I hadn't really done anything quite like it before. We didn't really know how it was going to go. We chose this live format, and we've kept that live. I think we did every week for almost 2 years or something live, which is pretty insane given how Luke and I live, especially.
Well, we didn't have anywhere to go at the time, if you recall. So it was relatively easy to be present for that. But yes, once things opened up, we rapidly worked out that if we were live every single week, something was going to have to give. That's when we went to the pre-records and also to eventually the fortnightly schedule, which I still would love to have been able to come to everybody every week and run these things, but it was just, I think we would have burnt ourselves out if we kept on with that trajectory. It's been challenging sometimes, as it is with the fortnightly, so definitely had an evolution.
Press was still here, and we often don't get a lot of feedback, but I think one thing happened. Luke and I went over to the VAPS convention in Victoria, and I think we lost count of the number of people that came up to us saying that was a God save during COVID in particular, or because we just do it for the love, and we always have, and there's no real agenda outside of that. We've got no sponsors, we've got no funding. We literally just had that intention of creating a space for the community to come together and celebrate landscape photography, and I think we've done that. And thanks to all your guests, in particular from all around the world that have shared their knowledge, and we'll probably share a little bit of who our favorite as in like some of our favorite shows or favorite guests will come up through the night. And it's, I've been influenced in different ways by the people I've met, and I've made some great friendships with international photographers. I've had my own personal heroes on the show, which has been really amazing, and photographers that I don't know that I see their work and like, oh my God, I've got to meet this person. So there's a little bit of selfishness in there as well sometimes, where it's like, oh, I want to meet this person, or I want to learn about infrared, or I don't know anything about underwater, and we've got the opportunity to reach out and with a little bit of legs with the show now at 100 to just engage with people around the world. Well, that's my 10 cents, boys. You go. How would you sum it
Oh
up?
no, I mean we've been very blessed with some of the guests that we've been able to have on the show, and for me personally, being able to have some of my photographic idols on the show, I guess namely Ken Duncan and Steve Parrish, and being able to link in with them and be able to pick their brains and get some kind of perspective on why they do what they do, and I learned so much just from having gentlemen like those on. But just I don't know, there's so many episodes that we've gone through. It's hard to, you don't really want to pick favorites, because we're very grateful for everyone that was able to tune in or join us on the show. We don't pay anyone for coming on. It's just purely their time, and they're doing it for the love of the community, and that's something I think that's very special, and probably not too much of that around these days. And we probably could have focused on trying to put a bit more in our pockets out of it all, but at the end of the day, it's more about the community, and that's the whole reason why we started it. Really was to have a space where people could come and learn more about photography, and just have something new and interesting and different every week or every couple of weeks that they could come across and learn about. So it's been great. And do you guys have any sort of other guests or memorable episodes that really have had left a really big impression on you at all?
Well, there's been a few. It's been a wonderful journey, and I obviously haven't been in on all the shows. And before I talk about that, I'd just like to acknowledge Luke and Paul, and Luke particularly with his technical prowess and organisational skills, and Paul with his networking skills and getting these people on the show. These two have really done the bulk of the work, and it would be wrong of me to pretend that I've done the bulk of the work when it comes to organising the shows, or even contributed my share, to be honest. Those two have done a fantastic job, and from my perspective, I'm not a well-networked person, and I've met a lot of wonderful people through this show that I just wouldn't have had the chance to meet at all. So I really like to thank the premise of the show and Luke and Paul for arranging to get a lot of these people on, and I've really benefited from meeting everyone. From a personal perspective, it's hard to single out individual guests and shows. I've really enjoyed quite a number of our last show was fantastic. I was really engaged with Joe Rainbow a long way back from the UK, and his philosophies and beautiful photography, and I definitely recommend, if you haven't seen Joe Rainbow's show, to search back in the archives and find it, because it's worthwhile having a good look at that one.
In a different part of the world too, that you wouldn't normally think about photographing, but just the depth and thought that he puts behind his images. Well, he is an art teacher anyway, isn't he?
Yes.
So certainly brought a lot of perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Polly?
Well, there's a lot of aspects, so I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. I think having a lot of the great legends that live around me, that are part of the landscape in Tasmania, that I looked up to when I first got here. We've had Rob Lakers and Grant Dixon and Martin Hawes and Chris Bell on the show, and they've actually really appreciated what we've been doing. And to be able to support them with their projects and books as well has been really wonderful. I think being a platform not just for rock star photographers, but some of the young and up and coming guys like Tim Cooper, and even earlier on Ben Mays, who's going like the Clappers, and who was your Sam Markham? Was it Luke? One of your
Sam. That's right, and the amazing, powerful story about the Black Summer bushfires as well. An incredible story. I really have appreciated some of the other guests we've had that have much deeper contemplative thought process, and I didn't tune into the show wasn't able to be there for the show last time on the 99th with Renee, but even most recently, some really great insights, and even Len Metcalf, and some of the other guests we've had have had just a really amazing depth to the show, and Paul and I have sort of discussed about continuing on next year, really trying to hone in on that depth and trying to get a little bit more into the people behind the photographs and why they do what they do, which I really feel is, it's where we got all the meaning and all of the interest out of what we're doing. It's what drives us and gives us the passion to keep on doing these crazy things at crazy hours of the morning and night. So, that's definitely... It
was Renee that actually reminded me of that on the last show. Like he said, there's not that many platforms out there that give artists a breathing room to really speak about their process in a really genuine kind of open way with a bit of space. And, if we really wanted to have 1 million subscribers or whatever, we'd probably be doing a podcast, but you can't look at photographs. And we haven't sort of done a show with bite-sized chunks. We probably might pivot a little bit next year and segment things or have some really punchy sort of aspects to it. But I think we're all quite motivated to go a little bit deeper and to get the kind of artists on board that, all around the world that can really speak to the artistic process and really get us thinking about why we're doing what we're doing, the intentionality and how that flows through into technique and style as well. And having an authenticity in your work is probably the most powerful thing you can do. And it takes a while to build the skill set and understanding and the self-awareness even to understand why you're doing what you're doing and to translate that visually is a great skill. So, yeah, Joe Rainbow's show, Renee Algersheimer, it was special for me to have Tony Hewitt on. He's a bit of a legend for me. I learned a lot from Peter Hill, actually, on the Infrared show. That's something that Luke's been inspiring me on. And when I saw the way he translated his work into black and white from Infrared, I was like, oh, my God, I got to try this. And I think, having our community behind us, people like Mieke and Matt and Tom Putt and Ricardo de Cunha and the TLC boys, there's Timmy's just coming in the back door right now. It's been really special for us to have a platform, I guess, to widen the community and to celebrate with them and to showcase their work and their projects, and especially people like Mieke and Matt who just, dived to the deep end and starting galleries. It's so ballsy and it's so amazing, it's so courageous. So that's been really special. And Mieke did such a beautiful post yesterday. I was going to write this big theme of my own, and I just went, oh my God, Mieke just summed it up so beautifully. I'm just gonna copy that or share that. So more to come. That's we gave ourselves a 15-minute slot to have our own little celebration, I guess.
Yeah, and there's one person too that we haven't thanked, and really is absolutely instrumental in the show, and we're actually really grateful to have Douwe Dijkstra, our dear friend Dex, join us tonight as our honorary panel member as well, which we've never done before, and. We probably should have introduced you sooner, Dex. We're sorry about that.
Round of applause for Dex.
Absolutely. So for those that don't know, Douwe does all of our graphics every single week, and we do handpick all the graphics. We do have a conversation about it. We obviously approach our guests for the actual images that we have as our thumbnail, and so it's I guess a big part of the communication side of what we're doing on the show. And so Dex is a very diligent graphic designer that's also an incredibly good black and white photographer. If you refer back to one of the very initial episodes on black and white photography, had Dex on talking about his book and all sorts of things. So I think he's been on a few times, haven't you, Dex?
Also book design.
Yeah, that's right. Book design. He's absolute whiz putting books together, and has done books for a lot of the other guests that we've had on across the years. Thanks so much, Dex. We owe you a lot.
Books. So basically, Dex has given us a professional face. Luke's given us the technical prowess to pull it off. I've lent into sort of who I know a little bit, and Nick's come on and really given a lot of depth to the show, especially with the things and the people and the subjects he's passionate about. But Dex has really given it such a beautiful, professional kind of cohesive feel about it. He's the fastest, most efficient designing person I've ever been on the planet.
Yep.
He's done all of this for free. He hasn't asked for anything in return. He's been incredibly generous with his time. So it's been nice to give him a bit of a platform to celebrate him as well. And we miss having him down here.
We certainly do, and hopefully he comes back down for a visit sometime soon. I'm actually really excited about being able to catch up with Dex in person for the first time in I don't know how many years, when I head over to Sydney for on the way over to a trip to Antarctica that I'm doing at the end of the year. So that should be pretty special to be able to spend some time together. Hey.
Three trips to Antarctica, mate.
Well, it's I'm only flying over there once. I'm not going to fly there and back that many times. That would be a bit out of control. But it should be.
Make no mistake, though. This is a show run by 4 people, not by 3 people.
Yes, absolutely.
Dex is every part of this show that we are, and thanks so much, mate, because you're the unsung hero behind the scenes that makes us look good every week. And thanks very much, Cobber.
Thanks for the nice words, but you're giving me too much praise. I'm just doing one tile, and it takes me 2 seconds to create.
Yeah, but you
very
well.
I love doing it, so I want you to look good as well, not just on screen, but as a brand as well. And I'm very happy creating that little tile every day, and love your show. And that's all people would say. Congratulations on the 100th episode. That's a massive achievement. So well done. A round of applause.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dex. Thanks very much.
I got this special little bottle of Bruno Island gin here that might get popped tonight. See how we go.
Going off the rails by the sounds, but that's
it wouldn't take much to send me off the rails. Mate. I have about 2 drinks a year, but
I hear he talks more when he drinks.
Oh no, jeez!
Look out!
Please
I'm gonna fall off the chair. So moving on to the next sort of part of the show, we had a lot of conversations about what we do to celebrate, and one of the things that felt really special to us to celebrate was the Natural Landscape Photography Awards. We feel is the premier awards in the world at the moment, and so we've got Tim Parkin and Mieke on tonight. Mieke Boynton to celebrate that as both an artist and the founder, one of the founders of the whole order. And we just couldn't think of anything that just lines more beautifully with what we personally love, what we stand for, the ethics and values and the style and the celebration of letting nature be the hero in terms of landscape photography, essentially, by minimizing sort of post-production and maximizing people's camera craft and initial vision and sort of deep relationship with landscape, I think, more literally than conceptually. And Mieke's done a wonderful job of taking out one of the major categories. And Tim actually quietly told me without speaking to Mieke that that's one of his favorite photographs. And we thought, geez, what a great opportunity to get the 2 of them to chat about that in person, because they wouldn't have had that opportunity maybe, apart from the 4 o'clock in the morning Zoom chat that you had to do. I did that last year, thanks, Tim, for the winners. As I snuck in there last year. But I'd like to reintroduce Tim Parkin. Tim Parkin is a very, very special man in the international community for many, many reasons. He's run the online landscape photography magazine for a long, long time, and which is arguably probably the deepest and most sort of deep fathoming kind of publication that exists in the world on landscape photography, arguably, and he has a good eye on what's happening in the world, and he has a very, very deep thinking space in terms of how to apply himself, and God knows how much work he's done in and around behind this competition.
Oh yeah, goodness me, yeah, absolutely.
I don't even want to know. I saw his photos, folks,
the certificates, and the book. Unbelievable.
And I'm very, very proud to have my copy here that's finally arrived.
Right.
And have a little section on the back.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, Mieke's got one too.
So I can wax liberal for hours about Tim, but Tim, congratulations on another incredible competition again. I don't know how much sleep you've had in the last little while, especially putting out all those incredible under the hood sort of responses individually for every single entrant through this 7 layers.
Discord has kept me busy.
So I'll shut up for a while and let Tim speak a bit about how it's been.
Yeah, it's been quite a roller coaster. I think the biggest difference this year is we ran the competition and 1.5 ton of books arrived outside our house just as the announcements were starting. So not only did we have all the press to deal with, we had all the books to send out for the first time internationally.
Oh wow!
And that was
Tim sent me a photo of him and his folks out the back trying to deal with the whole lot.
Everybody out
in the Scottish weather. It was fantastic.
Yeah, we got a phone call about that one on the day they arrived. We were going to go out climbing, and I was just answering a few questions about the competition, and I got a phone call from the village saying that I'm on the bridge and I can't find your house, and I'm like, but we only paid the customs for it yesterday.
Oh,
so,
no.
Yeah, they arrived and it was torrential rain. It was proper biblical rain outside. So we had to recruit loads of people to try and move everything inside.
Well done.
In my climbing wall shed.
No back injuries from all that heavy lifting, mate.
No, it seems to have done okay. So it's amazing how much you can get away with.
The competition for the second year seems to have gone well again. Have you got any stats for us in terms of entrance and that sort of stuff?
I have. Let me just go and find the stats because we have we're very efficient. We have a press release, which I should add, by the way. Mieke is now famous in Germany. I'm not sure if you know that, Mieke.
Yeah. What's the publication called?
Der Spiegel.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. I actually had a fellow email me and say, "Oh, I love your photograph. How can I get a hold of it? I saw it in this magazine." I was like, "Oh," but I couldn't get a translation because it's actually in German. But that was pretty cool.
I'll send you a translation. They sent me the full article and I translated it to look at. So, but
that would be fantastic. But yeah, it's huge.
Der Spiegel is like the biggest newspaper in Germany and is syndicated into a lot of European countries, translated as well. So
massive, yeah.
It's
thank
massive.
you.
And then when they reach something, they send it out to everybody else as well. So not only was it good for us, it's brilliant for you as well to see that represented in such a great photo.
Fantastic.
But hold on, I'll have some stats. Here we go. Right. 10,700 photographs from 55 countries by 1,179 photographers.
Wow.
8 judges, 3 from the US, 4 from Europe, 1 from Canada. And $38,000 worth of prizes.
Wow.
Yeah, that's huge.
And that's US dollars too, isn't it? So it's up there. Yeah.
That's why I've got no money.
That was fairly comparable in figures to your first year, I think, is it?
Yeah, it's slightly less actually, which isn't surprising. I think when you get the first year, you tend to get everybody going, yeah, we'll support that, we'll give it a go. I'm not entered a competition before, we'll support it. So we expected it to be about the same or a little bit less, but it's about the same amount of revenue because a lot of people are entering more photographs. And this year we also allowed people to enter 1 photograph, which is actually more expensive to enter that 1 photograph than it would be otherwise. So that made some more money. But it's all doing well. We've got enough money to get the book printed again, which is the main thing, which I'm now currently designing, and it's I might be able to show you a preview of that if you're interested later.
Yes, please. Yeah.
But yeah, the competition went well. We tried different ways of judging this year, which I need to chat about with people about to try and review it for next year. We had more live judging, and we handed on a few less focused pictures for people to review. So I think we handed 2,000 images to the judges in the first year. We handed 1,600. This is excluding projects to the judges this year. So about 500 per category. And the idea was to try and get some more, give them time to look at them and then think about them and then review and then come back to them again, rather than, if you know what it's like when you see a photograph for the first time, you don't develop a real feel for what it is yet. And we tried that and in the hope that we would get more agreement, but I think people just entrenched in their desires for what they liked. So it was quite an argumentative jury.
It must be quite a significant undertaking initially then to sort of whittle it away from in the first few rounds there. I mean, that must be just living and breathing that for a week or two, just going through all of it.
It's pretty much 2 solid weeks of reviewing and going back and forth because we try and have multiple cycles. So all four of us go through all of them, rank them all. Then I get all the scores back, and I try and mark which ones were people's favorites, and also mark which ones were maybe not a favorite, but scored a high average score. And then we get results out of that, which maybe hones them down to maybe a half or a third. And then we go back and rescore again, and then go back again. And then we manually go through them to see if they make sense, and which ones, we don't want over representation of certain areas or types of image. So we hone those down a little bit. And then we'll go outside our own sort of like group. So I've asked other people who have been around, is there anything I'm missing? And we make sure that everything that we could see as a possible winner in any way whatsoever goes through. And even then, we pass them through to the judges, and they say, well, why have you passed through this rubbish? And that's an idea of how selective or subjective it is, because when you ask them what rubbish, they all choose different pictures.
I think the thing I like a lot about this competition is that so many more quiet images make it through. We're so used to competitions where the epic light and the epic scene just kind of overwhelms everything else. And I really appreciate that so many of the photographs that made it through to the very end were less loud, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's something we really wanted to make work. And I think it also, it's testament to, I won't say Matt and mine's probably more Catholic tastes in photography, that we can go in and I try and be very, very self-aware of what I'm judging. So if I see something that's not immediate, I'll put it to one side for a bit. So if I can't make a quick decision, I'll try not to, and then come back to it later. And Matt's, both me and Matt have seen huge amounts of photography. We're fairly image aware. And we'll always come back and give stuff a chance. And also I think there's in the reviewing process, there's something that says you have to have a methodology around it. I don't think people are natural judges. It's if you react naturally to a set of images, you'll generally go like, don't like. It's Tinder for landscape photography. And that rejects so many things just because you don't like them, just because it's not reacting at that point in time. And I used to be, I'm not sure if I mentioned before, I used to be a A&R, a talent scout for a record company. And, you don't become a talent scout just to sign the music that you like. You're a talent scout to try and find the music that's going to earn money for your record label, that's going to be popular. So you've got to find a way of shelving your own desires to a certain extent and come back and say, well, what is popular? What do people want to see? What's, and there is a zeitgeist in photography, when I'm looking at things and I'm thinking, what will people like? I'm not thinking, what will the public like? I'm thinking, what will our community like? And I think that's another important aspect.
Tim, do you have a methodology that you give to the judges, or a set of criteria, or how do you sort of framework it?
We've not done that too much, but we will be doing it in the future. We've given them an idea of what the scores should mean to a certain extent, so that what 0 means. It doesn't mean it's a crap picture because it's got through to this stage in the competition. 0 just means that that probably has the least chance of getting through. And then when you get up to 3s, it should satisfy most criteria. And we're not looking for images that have the best composition, the best, etc. Just because something may have some technical flaws doesn't mean it should fail. But we haven't articulated that, I don't think, as much as we like, because we do see different judges behaving in different ways for certain. Some judges are rejecting things for minor compositional flaws. Others are rejecting them because it doesn't fit within a genre they like, or it doesn't match what they perceive as the category description. And there's various these things that we really need to be more specific about a way of thinking and a way of judging.
Yeah, I mean, as an entrant, it's kind of like, well, which category do I go in here, and how significant is that relative to where it's going to be positioned in the field in terms of the appropriateness of that choice? Like, I think you guys override some sections if you feel like it's really an appropriate category. You'll actually shift it to one yourself, is my understanding.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I noticed like last year you had a separate, if I remember correctly, separate aerial category, and this year you spread it all the way through, which then made it an interesting choice for the artist. Or is this a grand? Is this an intimate?
I mean, most of the aerial that ends up in the abstract. If it's a top-down aerial, it's fairly obviously abstract. But we had a lot of aerials that were grand landscapes and intimates. It wasn't. I've just got to let cat out. Hang on a second.
I quite like that though, because I think that the aerial perspective, it doesn't. Hello.
Hey.
It doesn't.
Showed the cat for those that I don't know if that made it on the main screen, but
yeah, we just saw a very cute kitty cat. But yeah, the aerial perspective, it's a perspective. So whether it's abstract or whether it's a grand landscape really depends on what you've shot.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Well,
I think I personally, because obviously it's one of my favorite genres, I appreciated two things. One, that I didn't have to give away up front that it was an aerial by being forced to put it in a category, which then took away the potential interpretive kind of fluidity of where and how it could have been captured, which I feel like is something I actually personally find a bit frustrating, because it's like, wait a minute, this could be under a microscope, it could be a macro, it could be, and all of a sudden I'm giving that away. And so not having to do
from you,
that.
Paul, it's from a plane, let's face it.
Is that?
Nothing.
No, this is a principle I think is quite significant. And so I really appreciated that, I think, this time around. And yet I'm thinking, geez, that there's some images that I wouldn't be able to tell if they were or weren't. And you have to decide without knowing if it's actually an aerial, what's going to win the aerial category, because it's not actually presented to you as an aerial. So I'm like, do you have to ring up the artist and double check, or just?
I think for a lot of them, it's reasonably clear. I mean, if it's got DJI camera in the metadata, bang on. If it's top down abstract, generally you can tell whether it's a macro-esque shot or not.
Yeah.
If you look at the raw file, the haze tends to give it away. But yeah, we had a couple where we had to get in touch and go, there's quite a few that were of a aerial perspective that could have been on a mountain or could have been from a. Yeah,
there's quite a few. I was looking like, well, that could go either way. That could be on a rock ledge or on a cliff face on the opposite side of this valley, where it's dropping down really underneath and below. And I was like, and
we were tempted to think, does it matter at that point in time? That's the interesting thing about putting it in the competition.
You gave an aerial award, so you would have to figure out which one's aerial to be able to give that award. So that's why I figured somebody's putting some thought into this.
Yeah. Does it matter actually? Is an aerial photograph, is it different if I walk up to the top of the mountain or if I'm flying a drone 6 foot above me?
Well, it's different to your credit card.
Oh, yeah. That's the biggest difference.
Maybe
sure.
I don't know if you're physically off the ground, would that be the criteria? I don't know.
Well, you could say it's aerial perspective, but I agree, and it's one of the issues. We were going to put a tick box in to try and tell us, but in the process of trying to get everything running in time, we forgot.
Well, speaking
one of the you go, Nick.
I was going to say, speaking of aerials and abstracts, we've of course got Mieke here, and Mieke took out the abstract or details category with a beautiful photograph.
I might share to it now.
Ocean deity. Yes, we'll get that on the screen somehow. Luke's going to share it. Mieke, I believe that you dug this out of your reject pile and just submitted it on a whim. Is that right?
Oh, I wouldn't say I was in the reject pile. What I would say is that when I was photographing this area, I'd been living up in the Kimberley for almost 10 years, and it was on an epic road trip driving from Broome to Northeast Vic. And I stopped at a number of locations. My favourite location was Gutharagouta Shark Bay for this aerial shoot. But by the time I got home, I had stacks of memory cards, and I processed some of the photos. And this particular area is quite close to a formation that looks like a tree. And I think when I did the first cull, I looked for the best photo of the tree and then continued. And then earlier this year, I had to prepare, well, I didn't have to. I wanted to prepare entries for the New Zealand Professional Photography Awards, the IRIS Awards. And I was sitting here, Matt was sitting there, and I went through that folder because it was just within the time period of 5 years. And she just hit me. I saw her face and I was just like, oh, how have you been sitting there for 5 years? So she wasn't rejected. She just been completely overlooked.
My tongue was firmly in my cheek.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got about, I don't know, 15, 20 photos of her. So I definitely saw her at the time. I just hadn't processed those photos. But yeah, I'm so grateful for this competition, because I think if you look at that photo, the tendency is to think that that's been manipulated, because how can nature create something so exquisitely feminine and beautiful? So yeah, I was, sorry, Nick.
I was going to say, I think Tim had something to say about that when talking with Matt Payne on one of his Facebook threads about the actual file itself. Tim, do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the raw file, because I think during the judging it was raised that, is it just a post photographic crop? But you must have recognised the framing when you were flying it there, because the framing is pretty bang on. Yeah.
There's a whole series to choose from. Basically, I got her several times over. I clearly, despite it being so long ago. Photographically speaking, I definitely saw her and composed her. What I really like is, some people see fingers across to the left, but I see a hand coming up underneath and kind of cradling the earth. If you can see that, it's got like a thumb and knuckles.
Yep.
And then her eyes, as I've pointed out in one of my posts, she's got tire tracks across her eyes. And it looks like her eyes have been sewn shut. And that to me is a very meaningful thing, because I did double check recently, and turtles don't nest in this exact area, but there are turtles nesting right up and down that coastline. And some of them are endangered. And in a lot of these areas, when you drive your four-wheel drive along the coast, you can, without knowing it, you can drive over turtle nests. And turtles generally only nest every 3 to 5 years. So, it can have a significant impact on the hatching of those turtles. So, yeah, I find her really meaningful. I'm obviously just reading into her, but I do think there's a message there. And that's why I wanted people to understand that it's nature and not me creating something.
And completely validated by the process of the Natural Landscape Photography Awards and their rules and their raw file checking, and what you're seeing in front of you, folks, is a completely real image that was there, and not only is it a beautiful image, it's got some environmental meaning as well, as Mieka's pointed out. And it'd be lovely to see this in large size and print, and I guess the place to see that at the moment, Mieke, is probably your gallery.
Yeah, we've got it. Matt convinced me that even we were trying to do mainly local photos big on the walls in the gallery, and he insisted that this one should go big on canvas with a beautiful white frame. And the details, even the ripples on the surface of the water, and particularly the tire tracks, you just can't see them in small size. You really have to see it.
Can I share my screen for a second, Luke?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I'll let you do that. Yep.
Have you got the raw
file? I need to also give you the permissions. Just 1 second.
I've got the larger version. I can share.
There we go.
One thing that I do want to note, Nick, is that even though this is real, and I shared that it was real, and I shared the rules of the competition, I still had people online blatantly say this is photoshopped and I don't believe you. And I think that's really sad that landscape photography has gotten to that stage, that even though you can share the rules of the competition and you can say that the raw files were checked, that there are people out there who just don't trust photography anymore. And I think that's really sad.
There we go. There's a raw file.
Right.
That's what's good about competitions like this, where there is a sort of a review process, and you can actually talk to that and speak to that, and it's getting this sort of I guess, adulation from the results, and you can also then say, that's been verified. So that there is an aspect where there's at least some check mechanisms, I suppose. Yeah.
This image is even better now. I can see the detail. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
You just reinforced why. Not only is it an amazing competition, it sits in a very important position in terms of maintaining that core sort of credibility to camera craft. And we're facing a future where AI, if you've seen the amount of AI stuff that's come out in the last 6 months, it's unbelievable. Even portraits of people, and I'm like, I couldn't even tell if it was a photograph or not. So I think, and that might come up through a conversation tonight later in the show when we get all the guests on, like where to from here, what's happening in the world. And
I think it will.
That's why I'll share a screen in a second, because there's one other aspect to your process that is very significant, and it's that the transparency of the process is like few competitions in the world. And if you want to sort of, I've just got one especially prepared earlier, I think. So here's one of mine. Do you want to take us through this process of 1 to 6 and sort of how that happens, and why you've decided it's really important to give people the transparency of this process? And
then also, I think Paul's really keen to know, what number he actually would have come out of that top 36.
If you like everybody else, you want to know which judges are which as well.
Yes, right.
No, we'll maintain that integrity of anonymity.
It was at the end of last year's judging, and we were discussing what people might like, because quite a few of the competitions give a certificate if you're a winner, and there was no way I was going to prepare those by hand anyway, because there was just anything that involves work for me. I always look for some way to save time, even if it costs me more time up front. It's a typical program, I think. So as we were looking at it, I was thinking, well, we got scores from all the judges, so we could actually give them more information about whether the picture was universally popular or polarizing in some way. And so that thought was there to begin with. And then it was, well, if we're going to give it to the winners, it'd be great if we could give it to a range of people who not just got commended, but got through to the final judging. So I wrote some software to mock up this to see what it would look like. And Matt convinced me that we should do it all the way down to, I think last year we did it, anybody who got through to the main judging, which would have been anybody got through to the main judges, got a certificate. And this year it was, well, why don't we give one to everybody? People entering the competition, what we want to do is improve landscape photography, give people a framework where they can see comparatively how their images are judged by people, whether one image is better than another in terms of judging. And so we put this together. Now, there is a point where we say, well, not only is it scored, but the images are also selected. So unlike, I think, some other competitions, we don't just go by the numbers. We get the scoring done. We try and come up with maybe filter it down to the top 20%, and then we manually select the last 10% to go through, or whatever the numbers are. And so we had to show what stage people got through to as well. And we had to represent, so if you get through to the final stages, you get scored by 8 judges, but you were scored by 4 judges in the first rounds as well. So you want those two scores to add up. So we got some sort of average scoring going on as well on top of that. We didn't want to just give away the scoring raw to be able to say this is exactly what you got scored at this stage, because one, it's not significant. It's not healthy that people start deconstructing the scores. And two, the most important thing for me with the scores is to look at 2 images and say, well, how did that one score in relation to that one? And for a single image to say, is it one that's universally liked, or is it one where I've only pleased 1 or 2 judges? And either of those things is good, just in different ways.
Well, I'm not aware of any competition that gives you that insight into the variation in the judging and the individual judges. And I think I actually really like that, because it's sort of like, if you think you're blown out, somebody liked it, you get left with that sort of and just the sense of, it's artist judging art, and it's a subjective process largely. Obviously you lean into very, very experienced judges, and I think your judging panel is arguably one of the best in the world. Hope to get on it one day, mate.
But I think that's one of the things we want to get over more than anything, is that how that you're not going to lose because your image is bad. Mostly you're going to not be chosen because your image is not universal. An image has to appeal to a group of judges at the end of the day. Even though so many images were liked by one person, they didn't stand a chance unless at least 4 judges liked it as well in some way.
But that's one of the reasons.
Sorry, Mieke.
I was just going to say, I think that's one of the great reasons, one of the reasons that it's so important that you did have those conversations at the end, because having done some judging myself, the discussion about why becomes so much more important in those last stages.
Yeah, and because people will explain what we did in the way the judging worked is we had a pre-live judging session where people got to pick their favorites.
I'll just put up an example here, just a random example.
Paul did it. You had to do it, didn't you?
Just as we can go through the rounds and things like that.
That's probably. This is probably a good example. Okay, the first pre-judging is our screening. So we go through and we say let's just go through and pick things that are definitely not going to go through to the main judges. The next judging is, okay, let's go through and screen those for our final selection, which are going to go through to the 8 judges, because as much as we'd like to pay them enough to go through all 10,000, that's very difficult. The finals, we then have a first round of live. We have a first screening where people go through everything manually and give them scores. And once they've scored everything, we have this live judging where they then go through and pick their favorite. I can't remember how many we had. I think we had 6 per judge. So, but that gives them a chance to chat about the photographs as well and say, what do other people think about these? Am I picking photographs for my favorites that stand no chance whatsoever, or do I think I can convince the other judges that this is a great picture? And so when the judges were choosing, then they were choosing pictures that they loved, that they thought they may be able to convince people. They also picked pictures that they thought would be universal straight away, that the judges would like. And you can see this in the scoring of this picture, for instance. You've got 2 judges here that gave it full marks and one that gave it nearly full marks. And you've got 1 or 2 judges that gave it nearly 0 marks. I think 2 or 3 stars is pretty much 0 stars in that final judging. So how does that work? It's a landscape photography. You'd think these people were so aware of landscape photography that it would be obvious what is a good picture or not. And I think that is really important to get across to people, is that.
Yeah, that was my point. I completely agree.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, what happened was, okay, back to the next round live judging. So they chose their favorite 6 each. They went away and they said, we'll give the 6th choice of all the judges to everybody. So they've got a week to live with them. And then when it came back to final live judging, they'd all had a chance to see through all these. They knew what they were getting into. And the first step of the final live process was to get each judge to show their top 3 after they've had time to do it. The other judges got to comment on them, and then they finally chose their favorite 1 picture.
Wow.
So the final round was 1 favorite from every judge.
So you did championing, and they had to be different? Or what if they were?
Yes. Well, no, they could be the same. That's fine. Okay. But they were being tactical about it. So if you get 2 people choosing the same, they said, I'll choose one and you choose the other. So that was going on. And then at the end of that, we had voting based on what would go through, which got very argumentative.
Wow.
That sounds intriguing. Argumentative.
So does that mean
conversational and there's argumentative.
Are you all still friends?
It was close at the end.
Wow.
No,
I'm not surprised, to be honest. I think that you can't help but, when you're trying to choose the very best, I think those that move you're really going to go into bat for. And when it doesn't seem to have the same effect on other people, that can be very frustrating.
Absolutely, and I think it is.
Yeah.
It
Having
is
been
trying
on
to explain how do you articulate why something moves you so much, and why. And when somebody doesn't get it, it's like, you know.
Yep. And some people are better at articulating than others.
That's where it comes down to the judges a little bit. Like, it's because you've got, you know, such a caliber panel. Like, I've certainly been on panels where certain individuals just have such exceptional visual literacy and empowered kind of emotional understanding that by the time they put the two together, you can't sort of stay glued to your seat. And there's other people that's not necessarily their natural skill set, but they do have the experience and ability to see similarly, but not necessarily express that or argue in a certain way. So it's, you really have to dig deep to get a panel that's capable of kind of championing each image. And that very specific example you're talking about, one image each, because you know, on a certain panel it could be skewed the other way by somebody who's just basically better at it. That's an oversimplification, but I've certainly seen it happen. So I don't feel unconfident at all with the panel that you guys have. In fact, I could imagine it just be a matter of trying to get people to back off enough to let everybody else get a word in, I imagine. But
this was one of the, I mean, we have to review this slightly because when it comes to the final rounds, people were picking their favorites, which is great. But you can get a situation where there were certain images that were not getting through because they weren't favorites, that were universally liked as well.
Right.
So when it comes to a compromise at the end, some people felt that picking one picture that the other four hated was too much, where it would have been better to maybe pick a picture that none of them were utterly passionate about, but had a universal liking. And I don't know how to draw the line between those two. We need to try and find a balance.
Wow. Yeah, what
that is an interesting one. I've seen that sort of play out in quite different ways. I think you need to, you know, and a lot of the judging training that I've done, they put a real precursor that you really need to, as you alluded to earlier in the show, Tim, about putting yourself aside and recognizing, having the level of self-awareness to know where your biases lie, and to be ready and open and willing to listen, and to be able to be moved by other judges and their arguments, by pointing out things that you hadn't noticed or hadn't quite understood, or connecting the dots for different elements that underpin the fabric of the image that you hadn't really put together yourself. And so again, I think that's about having an ethos of how you frame the process that encourages people to be as open as possible, because it's one thing to be stuck in your corner and with your big red flag. It's quite another to have the wherewithal to know when you might have got it wrong, or when you haven't actually seen something properly, or the ability to really genuinely listen. And I think that's something I personally absolutely love and thrive about on judging panels. I've learned so bloody much just from shutting up actually and listening to the others around me.
We had a question actually on YouTube just about if there was many photos that fail raw verification. Is there sort of a hit rate or sort of a attrition rate there?
Yeah, I mean, very, very few. I want to just have a quick check myself. I'm not showing
the message.
Yeah. I'm just going to do a filter out all the raw files for a second. Doesn't contain much raw. Okay, 1,455. And if I count the rejects, 100.
So these were just of the ones that made it through to the raw stage. So not everyone presented their raw files. I just want to point that out because that will certainly factor in.
Where's that line, Tim? Like, I mean, we got the message. I think I had 8 of mine on Luke here stack as well through, but I had no idea where in that process that those raw verifications come in.
Every picture that got presented to the final judging panel got raw checked.
So it's from that live kind of halfway down that kind of graphical process. Okay, yeah, it's just
so basically, once they get through that first stage, we just contact everybody and ask for raw files, and the judges get sent the pictures.
It's quite a job, Tim, to go that far. It's still a lot of images.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, the raw checking process is hard, but I mean, I used to do it. I still do it for the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and they used to do raw checking from day one with 25,000 images.
Wow,
that was 4 days of non-stop 10-hour a day checking.
Wow. Yeah.
And they decided not to do that.
These 4 days. Wow. 4
I
days.
think that-
25
Snow
hours.
leopards in there.
Yes, yeah. You wouldn't believe some of the things you saw, but yeah.
I can't believe. I can't wait.
What
to
is
talk
the
about
other
snow leopards a
anteater?
bit
Giant
later.
anteaters? Yeah.
Oh, the anteater was a good one because you can't raw check that. That's,
Of course. Yeah.
and the same with the wolf.
The
Going under
anteater. Oh, the
fence.
anteater. Oh, dear.
I don't know if anybody's not aware of
Taxidermy
this.
awards.
This was I was involved in the
Awards.
process for this, where the wildlife photographer had a picture of an anteater at night with the termite mounds, luminous green dots, and the background of a national park. And somebody mailed in and said, "I recognise that anteater. It's at the entrance to a national park in a glass display case." They went like, "What?" So the wildlife photographer of the year sent 3 professionals. They sent what represented the WPY, a taxidermist, and an anteater specialist to South America, to the national park, to review what they saw on site. And they looked at it, and the guy had broken in, stolen the anteater, put it in the middle of a scene next to an anteater nest, photographed it, and then put it back in the case.
Yeah, that's
I
brilliant.
think it's a bit sad if you're going to go to that much effort to cheat the rules.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. I mean,
I think the good thing is now that you've got a couple of years under your belt, there's going to be people like me, and I don't think everyone's like me, but I'm saving images in a folder with the raw file as I go, so that by the time the competition comes around next year, I don't have to go hunting for anything.
Yeah. Well, the very best thing that came out of the competition, which surprised me, was a chat on Discord recently, where a few photographers were saying, when I'm in the field now taking pictures, I'm thinking of making sure that the picture is as clean as possible without having to clone anything in advance. And I'm like, oh my God, we're affecting fieldcraft. And that was the best thing I'd ever heard. I mean, it's like if we can influence 2 or 3 people like that to say, I'm going to try and get it in camera right because I might want to enter it into the competition.
Look, it all comes full circle. I've been doing that the whole time, and now people are saying, "Oh, I better think about not having to clone stuff out."
But it's really good that it's gotten to that, because I think, you know, that comparing chalk and cheese has always been really difficult, and knowing now that your cheese is compared with cheese is, you know, it makes it worthwhile to stick with cheese. You know, it just. You know what I mean, though? Like it's
cheese is great.
It validates what you have wanted to do, and makes it purposeful rather than you feeling like you're constantly up against it. And I know that's how you felt, Nick. I know you've talked about it quite a bit, but there are a lot of photographers who have always felt that, you know, they'd prefer the kind of photographs that are being entered into an LPA, and the relationship that nature photographers have with nature and how that impacts on taking landscape photographs. And you know, I think it's fantastic that we can have these discussions and actually have a platform to showcase the best of these type of nature photographs.
And that's exactly the point, Mieke. The images that we have, whether you are into the natural stuff or you're into a bit more computer craft, they're all perfectly fine. But it was, for me, as you pointed out, and for others, we needed some sort of platform where you're on that level playing field, and you could appreciate that raw capture as not exactly raw. I mean, the rules are pretty good in the Natural Landscape Awards for being able to do contrast and colour manipulation and that sort of stuff to a degree, but you know, it just gave us that spot where you could enter a competition, or at least appreciate it and know that it's gone through a process and that it is what it is, but there's nothing wrong with the other process, and there are other competitions for that exact sort of image type.
Lots and lots of competitions for that.
Yeah. So it gives it a balance, and I think the popularity of the Natural Landscape Awards is just goes to show that there are that many people out there that wanted. There was a desire for that type of competition, because and it was just that voice was going unheard for a while, or it was being heard and somewhat ignored to a degree, and it's great that we have both options, so you can do either or do both. And there are certainly a lot of people that do exactly that. I mean, Matt's a good example, Mieke, of someone that likes to dabble in both types and does so beautifully with each. And it's great that we've got that, Tim. So
I think it's probably worth saying too that there's probably other people that tried to do sort of real landscape photography awards, but the amount of effort and organisation and just being able to put together a little software program to do certificates and bits and pieces, that not many people can actually be able to manage that kind of work and set things like that up. So it's definitely I'm really hopeful or hoping that you guys can keep it running how you are, because it's got such potential to be such an incredible international competition. And so certainly really enjoyed being part of it this year, and thoroughly encourage everybody else that is watching to consider entering next year, because you do actually get feedback. There's so many competitions out there that you put an entry in and you just never hear anything again, and at least you get some level of idea of what happened with your entry, which is always nice. And also we've actually got Tim Wrate just joined us now too. Tim
Hello, everybody.
Tim came fourth in the project category. So yeah, well done, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I was look, I know I've missed the first hour, so I must extend my apologies to everyone. I would have loved to have been able to, get a lot deeper into the results of the competition.
You have responsibilities these days, Tim.
Yeah, well,
you do.
I've got two responsibilities, Nick. I've got a 4-year-old responsibility and a 2-year-old responsibility.
That's exactly right.
And no, actually, we were in front of the camera this afternoon, not behind the camera. So my wife organised a portrait shoot with the family. So all it did was just, really hit home that I'm a lot more comfortable behind the camera.
You look better behind the camera, mate.
Thank you. Yeah. This is a face for radio. Yeah. But I know you guys have probably already said it, but it's very special to have Tim Parkin here, and your efforts, Tim, with all the founders and the judges. What an incredible effort. What a resounding success both last year and this year's competition have been. And you guys just keep on setting the benchmark. So thanks for all your efforts.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll chime in there, Tim. I said it on the last show, but I think it's one thing to have a standalone competition. It's another to create an entire year, which you do, of consistently celebrating and showcasing all the artists across the entire spectrum of the competition. And nobody else does that. Absolutely no one. So I feel like, as Mieke alluded to earlier, the very understated work that often doesn't get a voice in other competitions. Not only it's you're giving it a voice almost irrelevant to where it actually came in the competition. You're giving a lot of backdoor opportunity for all sorts of different artists and lots of subtle and really elegant work that might have otherwise been slip away. And to do that consistently through a whole year is a huge commitment. And it's way beyond anyone else does. So I feel like you're kind of celebrating a culture of landscape photography and empowering those people that really want to celebrate nature as the hero, really, more than anyone else is. And that's, again, why we wanted to have you on for 100th episodes. We just feel all very strongly and very personally just how magnificently that aligns with our own personal values. And
plus the timing was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it is something that's really important to us. I think I wrote an article a while ago about what my perfect competition would be, and it was you don't have to enter it. There are no prizes and no winners. Unfortunately, it wouldn't quite work financially doing it like that. So the fact is, the competition is a bit of a bait and switch, because it's the main thing about the competition is the representation of photographers. It's the framework and everything else that goes with it. And the winners, sorry, Tim, I mean, it's great to have winners and Mieke, but it's the whole lot that's important. So being able to represent in the book and in the website, and possibly in other ideas we have in the future to try and showcase images, is the reason for it. If it was just the winners, then I know I wouldn't do it, full stop.
So tell me, I'm not sure if I read it right, but in the back of the book, for instance, did you get the judges themselves to pull out some of their own individual favourites and speak to why they were drawn to them? They weren't actually necessarily winners. I think it was. I just noticed that when I was looking through it today, and I was like, wait a minute. And is that again speaks to that ethos of just that widest, broader sort of celebration of all sorts of people and that inclusivity and almost a culture rather than the individual sort of, comparative highlighting, which is a wonderful thing if you're on the top edge, but it's not often as much fun if you're at the bottom edge, and you're just spreading that so much wider and creating this lovely buffer of just broader celebration. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the social media channel was, and sharing the photographs on there was a big thing. You share the winners, that's great. But we had loads of pictures we wanted to share beyond that, and the book was the obvious thing. And it was always at the start was, are we going to make enough money to be able to publish the book? And the first book is just about paid for itself now. I think we've got about 200 books left that will be. If we can sell those, then I can pay myself for some of the work doing the technology for it.
Whoever's listening and doesn't have one, if you've got a photographic friend or family member who loves landscape photography, it is the best coffee table book, and you should get online and buy it.
It's
pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing quality
as well.
Certainly seeing Paul's one has made me want to put an order on as well. It's fantastic. Yeah.
But beyond the book, there were still loads of pictures, because when we were choosing images for the book, and I'll do the preview for the book if you're interested in a bit. In fact, I can do that now. If you want to preview it.
Yes, we'll probably
absolutely
keep it moving on. Yeah.
What a treat.
So yeah, when we're going through the book, we made loads of decisions about what's to include, but there were loads of things we couldn't represent. And we thought, well, why don't we just put those on the website, on the social media? So we just started doing that, and it carried on. Right. It's like we've still got images we like.
You know what I love about your social media posting, though, is not only that you're showcasing the images, but you do what so many people don't do. And that is, if you've got the handles for the photographers, either Facebook or Instagram, you actually tag the photographers. And that's something that's always been a bit of a bugbear with me. When people go ahead and post your image without any link back to you, I just feel like, putting your name there that's fine. But if you can shine the light back on the photographer a little bit, then, that's so much better. And I know how long it takes to find those handles, because I don't know that the first year you asked for us to go find them by hand. So it was an epic effort. So not only are you showcasing the images, but you're actually giving the credit where credit is due and shining the light on those photographers. So I just think that's fantastic.
Yeah, we are. I'm just going through at the moment, and I'm going to send a message out to everybody who got through to the main judges and ask them for their social media details. And one of the things we want to do with the book this year, we're going to see how it'll work. But somebody said, wouldn't it be great if we could have in the book, next to the photographs? Now, here's the start of some of the winners, etc. Some details of who the photographer were, their social media handles, how the photograph was taken. And so we're going to ask everybody to give us that information, and we're going to produce an extended PDF of the book, which will include
amazing
essays and things, and information from the photographers. And I think that's really nice side of it, because it's the more we can give to the photographers information to share who they are and what they've taken, the better. And in choosing the pictures for the book, the idea that the book isn't the winning series of pictures in sequence scored. The book is.
I see a Luke Sharkey there.
Yeah, I saw a Luke Sharkey there.
Whereabouts? There we go.
Up a bit, yeah. There we go. Yeah, nice.
Not bad.
So yeah, the idea is to choose a wider range of types of photography and broad range of photographers. We could put in the same photographer multiple times because they have so many great images. But it's better to try and share. That's one of my particular favorites.
I like that one. Oh, very nice.
Incredible. Just the variety of subject material as well.
Hey,
Yeah, beautiful.
There you go. And I think,
so we try and.
sorry, jump in for one sec, Tim. Is where also this stands out. There's a lot of competitions that will showcase the images. There's very few that take the time to allow that conversation to go deeper by giving the artist their visual and literal voice and words to explain in and around it. And I also think what's different is at the back of the book, at least the last one, we had the judges speaking to images on a very, very personal level. And that gave to me personally, I found that gave me huge insight into who the judges were as well, in terms of how they think, how they see, what they appreciate. And I think it's rare you get that access to that kind of conversation. They're just these random people you don't really know who cast judgment, and sure, they might have a reputation in the community, but to actually get a literal look into exactly how they're thinking about specific photographs is very rare. And I appreciate that you've honored that as well.
Have you seen enough?
No.
It's fantastic. Yeah,
it's so good. It's amazing.
It is a magnificent way just to go through, because I was sort of ruining that we didn't have the chance to go through the website and see the images. So it's quite nice to be able to see them in the book itself and also get a sneak peek, which is always
it's a special treat. Because is it going to be a year, Tim, before people see it? What's it going to be this time?
We've currently got the money ready to put the down payment on it. So we've got like 50% upfront payment ready. The book's going to print on the 16th to the 18th of January. That's a 3-day job. For this year, we're printing it about 20 miles away from my mum and dad's house in England, so I can go on site and actually sit with it to be printed.
Oh, nice.
The company prints Joe Cornish's books and Simon Baxter's books, so we know they can do the job. So we should have it in February to start sending out.
Oh wow.
Is the idea to do it in a similar format to the last one in terms of the shape and the cover, so they sort of look like a bit of a set? Yep.
It's going to be slightly smaller because the publisher we went with, or the printers we went with last time, gave us the wrong dimensions for the book.
Oh.
It was actually it was about an inch oversize.
Really?
So it actually cost us quite a bit extra because of that.
Yeah.
So this, and also because they could do it because they were on, I think it was a B1 press. I might get it wrong. The place we're going has a B2 press, which is actually better because if you're printing something at the full size of the press, you get better registration accuracy. So the rosettes line up perfectly, and if the CMYK rosettes don't line up, you get color shifts on pictures, which is one of the problems we had. So it's going to be about half an inch less that way, but the same that way.
Okay.
It's going to be the same number of pages. We're going with a slightly lighter paper, but it's forestry approved, environmentally friendly paper. Well, as much as you can get that. So it should be.
And what's your curation process? Because obviously a lot of the images aren't necessarily in the top of the tops that have been advertised. Who decides? How do you decide what goes in the book?
That's the fun bit. I do.
That's what I thought.
Great.
It's a combination though, because what we do is we take all the scoring that was given by the judges in advance, and we take that into account. We take into account.
Oh, there's a Hoelen. There you go.
Hey, here we go.
Yeah, I think we've got two in. There's another one somewhere.
Oh, really? Oh, sweet.
I saw one of Matt's earlier too.
Don't take the question mark out. It's definitely mine.
We've got. Hang on, where are you?
I can see Luke in there. Yeah.
Where are you?
Oh, I saw Luke's name in there. H Hoelen, where's that? H.
No, you're up here. Paul Hoelen question mark again.
Question mark.
There you go.
What do I have to do?
There's the question mark now. This is an example of what we've been trying to do, is to try and make sure we've got as many photographers as possible represented. Wow. So where there's two photographers, I've generally tried to find one that can take out or move around.
No,
but obviously there are some, I think, like Mr. Pettit. This Jason Pettit had nearly won one of the Photographer of the Year awards. So we thought, well, we'll put a few of his pictures in. And the same with, say, Jim Lamont, who won an award, but one of his other pictures was brilliant. So if I go to 183.
Well, it must just be, once you're getting to that level, the decisions are just, it's hard. You have to flip a coin sometimes. Yeah.
There we go. That one there.
Tim, one of the things that, and thankfully you're sitting on it right now, but one of the, I guess, subcategories that was celebrated this year with an individual category award was environmental. And I think that was really important to celebrate images that have different stories as opposed to kind of aesthetic beauty. And yeah, I think it's really, well, thank you for including that as a subcategory, because some of these images wouldn't necessarily stand on their own, kind of, if they were being assessed, along different criteria.
It's a funny one, the environmental, how to choose what you're going to put in, because it's some images are overtly environmental, some are just, say, metaphors. For instance, there's that glacier one isn't environmental, but it looks wonderful as a metaphor for what's changing, if you know glacial processes. And
Sam, how we were talking earlier, Tim, about well, actually, you probably just missed it. One of the things I was celebrating about our show is the platform we've given to a lot of up-and-coming photographers, and one of them was Sam Markham, actually. That we had on our show, who's an up-and-coming photographer, and he spent a huge amount of time talking us through the literal process of just about melting his cameras and being caught in fire with his family and trying to save his house. And it was just like, so I've got the most incredible, visceral story behind, his fire-based images in particular. I'll never forget the rest of my life. And I think
how long the exposures for those were too. It was in the minutes to get
some of them were quite long. It was really dark. There was so much smoke. It was almost black visually.
And the fact of the matter is that was taken during the middle of the day in an Australian summer.
Yeah, that's true too, because the smoke around. Yeah,
I mean, this is why we want more stories behind the pictures in the book. I mean, if we could do a 400-page book, we'd do it. But there's no point putting text in books, too much text, because you want to see pictures. That's why we have books. So enough text to make a picture, to make the book interesting, but not enough to get in the way of the images.
Yeah, I thought you had that balance really nice in the first book. The essays were really on topic, really interesting, but not so much that you go, oh, here we go, another 5 pages of text.
Yeah.
Well balanced, Tim. But I mean, that's your editorial skills as well, really coming into light, mate.
I've been dying to do book design for a long time, and I spent ages going through all the books in my library trying to find the inspiration for how to make a book work, what I like about it.
That's just an amazing thing to do that and apply that to celebrating other people's work as well. It's quite a selfless thing to do. So
I hope you're proud, Tim, mate. Like that's I can't be sure, but my sense is so much of the work is happening out of and actually I probably shouldn't say it because I'm sure everyone's working really hard out of the whole team, but my sense is that there's quite a bit going on in the Parkin house to make all this work.
Well, Paul, I sometimes live on the depths of the internet, and I'm a member of a Discord channel, which Tim sometimes frequents. And Matt Payne was saying that how frequently he gets text messages and emails from Tim Parkin at 2-3 o'clock UK time in the morning, of course.
Yeah, I don't sleep particularly
hours
well.
in the day, Tim. Yeah.
Wake up in the middle of the night going, oh, I've got this idea, Matt, and I know he's awake. So
well, that's good.
It is about opportunity though, because I run the landscape photography magazine and I run a film scanning business. I had the bandwidth to be able to say, okay, on landscape might suffer a little bit, but my wife does a lot of work on that, putting the articles together. But at the end of the day, it can complement on landscape as well, I think.
Definitely.
And you're right when you say a lot of people couldn't do it, because we're very lucky that I've worked in software before and I've worked in design. So
you can pull it all together.
That's why we managed to do the magazine in the first place. And we know business a little bit. My wife was the person who started the first internet marketing search engine optimization company in the world. She used to work for Asda, which is part Walmart bought, and then this was in 1999. She left at that point in time. So we've got this background of all the skills that we can just about get away with it. I mean, we shouldn't put down Matt Payne has got he's a work machine. I've never known anybody work as hard. He does the promotion of it with it, and all the networking. And I think without his reach and our skills, we complement each other really well. It wouldn't have been the success it is.
So it sounds like he's off on a well-earned holiday now as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Where is it? South America somewhere.
Yeah.
Antarctica.
Antarctica.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's a leapfrog down to Antarctica. Got you. So it must be on the go. Luke, you might see him down there, mate.
Yeah, I reached out to see when he was finishing up and whether we'd cross paths. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah. But well, thanks so much for joining us, Tim, and you're welcome to stay on and as we continue chatting. We've actually had a few other guests join in the meantime as well. So yeah, we're happy to leave that in your hands if you would like to do that. But we want to welcome.
Just so the audience knows that there is a whole show where we had Tim and Alex Nail on side by side. I actually did ask Alex tonight, but he's in his favourite place in the world, in the South African mountains. But again, a real pleasure and privilege to have you on, Tim. And I think you're pretty clear about where we stand and how respectful we are of the work you've done and how significant this competition sits in the world of landscape photography. So hats off to you, sir.
Absolutely.
Pleasure to have you on our 100 show main guest and to have Mieke and Tim on as winners as really significant places in there as well. And little chuffed to find out me looking at the book too, actually.
Yeah. Can't complain with that. Yeah.
It'd be great to chat with you in the future about how we can develop the competition and things as well. So let's stay talking about that.
Yeah, I'm all ears, Tim. I said that when it first came out, when I was lucky enough to get that 4 a.m. phone call like Mieke got. If it was useful to put feedback into that, I'd be more than happy to. In fact, that'd be great, actually.
Fab, we'll do that. Thanks very much.
I'll try and find that CatKiss website you were telling me about, Tim, and send you some 2 a.m. messages to see if you're up. So
I'm actually going to take the lead and also say goodbye because Matt and I are actually in the same room and we can't be on together because it creates a loop. So I'm going to say thank you very much for including me and Tim. It was really lovely to meet you, and I really appreciate being on this very special episode, and hats off to you guys for making 100 because that's epic. It's really impressive.
Thanks, Mieke. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for being part of it too. You've been on more than a few times, and we really appreciate your commitment and willingness to join in and share what you know with everyone as well. It's been
absolutely
great.
Yep.
I just feel very lucky every time you ask me. I'm like, yay! All right, we'll have a great time. I will be watching the rest of it, but just not here. All right.
Congratulations again, Mieke.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done. Well done.
Thank you. Bye.
See you.
Who else have we got, Leggy?
Well, we're joined by the very illustrious Ricardo de Cunha, Chris Saunders, and Matt Palmer. So, gentlemen, very warm regards for joining. And
feel free. Thanks for your patience, guys. We said pop on about 8:30. We're having such a good time. We lost track of time in there a bit, but I hope you're enjoying that. Ricardo, how are you, brother?
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much for inviting us over tonight, and a huge congratulations to all three of you. What an incredible amount of dedication and commitment over, I guess, the last almost 3 years now, 2.5 at least. I find that very admirable that you guys have found the energy and the time to consistently put a show out together and benefit the community. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed watching on many times, and I've got something out of each and every episode that I've seen. So a big thank you from me and a huge congratulations.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.
But you're obviously in celebrating mode there already, mate. Like popping
absolutely. You guys.
And I think actually having Ricardo on reminds me of, I think, one of the most significant shows where we decided to be a little bit courageous, I think, early on in the show, and we did a show basically on mental health and well-being. And Ricardo came on board, and Will Patino came on board. I can't remember who else we might have had.
I think Adam Williams was on, was he?
Adam Williams, and it's sort of, we thought, geez, how can we use, because really the platform isn't necessarily about showboating ourselves. It's about community and development. And we thought, well, we've got this opportunity to have some very, very real, genuine, authentic conversations that aren't often very public, and by sharing our stories and by giving a voice to things that are often sort of tucked away, it lessens its power over people. And by sharing our own individual challenges to some extent, people don't feel so alone with it, or separated, or isolated, or just like individualized in terms of the challenges they're going through. And so hats off to you, Ricardo, for putting your hand up for that one, mate, and sharing some of your story and being a part of that. And that may be something that's worth maybe following up on next year, I reckon, like just touching base in a different way, and maybe addressing, because I think some of the big issues weighing on us all, I think, are getting a lot heavier, like, the kind of predicament that the world's facing from a species extinction point of view and all that kind of stuff is getting pretty heavy, and it's hard to wake up each day not having that in mind somewhere. And I don't think, as landscape photographers, that's a very direct sort of part of what we do. Is sometimes we're on the coalface of seeing these changes actually happening. And I might make a point of seeking out some photographers next year that literally have dedicated themselves to doing that visually as well. And there are quite a few photographers that have.
Yep.
And
2 years ago on my birthday, actually, Rick did an amazing presentation on the path to more meaningful imagery as well. And so you've always appreciated that about Rick's work, about thinking a bit more deeply about what he's trying to communicate in the images that he's creating. And it's fantastic discussions coming from that. Yeah.
Thank you, Luke.
Hey, so Ricardo, we can't get all of you guys on at once, but I know yourself and Chris and Matt and Mieke have been on a big journey together recently. I've actually heard nothing about it, and I don't know sort of whether you want to talk about it or share some stories, or Matt or Chris as well. But I've been really curious about sort of how that went and what it was like, and the camaraderie of coming together. For quite a few years, a lot of us haven't been able to do that. We've been stuck at home or stuck inside, or particularly in Melbourne. I mean, you guys, oh my God. It must have been like sticking wings on and taking off into fairyland or something.
I'll pass it on to Matt or Chris, and I've spoken enough. Matt can chime in now.
No, you barely spoke, mate. You were spoken about, but you didn't do much talking.
Well observed, Matt. Well observed.
Share it around, Matt.
So Matt Palmer, everyone, current and forever acting Australian Professional Photographer of the Year.
I'd probably say that button's probably been passed back to Chris now.
Actually, I forgot about that. I haven't really done that. I mean, it was amazing to be there live, Chris. In fact, I live streamed Chris from the bus with a bus full of about 80 people screaming at him in celebration of him winning the probably the closest equivalent to that, where the APP went down, which Luke and I discussed before the show, whether that we brought that up as one of the more significant things that's happened in the last year. But the NZIPP, which is the New Zealand equivalent, voluntarily sort of took on the mantle of representing the Australian photographers in as close a way as they could. And Mieke won the landscape in category. I was the finalist, and Chris won overall. And I went up on the stage to collect your trophy, Chris.
One of many.
He's thinking about coming on. He's muted at the moment. We want to hear you, brother.
Thank you. Very generous.
There he is.
It was fantastic that NZIPP could put something together and have us Australians all involved in. It was a shame I couldn't be there in person, but really enjoyed the process and watching it online and seeing the quality of images and prints and things like that was a fantastic experience. And I personally just think I'm keeping it warm for Matt for another year, and then Matt will pick it up next year. So keep that pattern swapping going on for a few years, I think, if we can.
Yeah,
I wanted to acknowledge Chris as well. So what Chris did, and I think there's a few people involved in generating the idea, but he actually gifted all his winning prints to raise money for the local, was it local firefighters? Nelson, was that it, Chris?
I don't know where it actually went to, Paul, in the end, but yes, it was like search and rescue.
It was
or something.
Nelson, like helicopters. I saw photos of helicopters and search and rescue and that kind of thing. And funny enough, the day after the awards, Nelson was underwater and had 5 days of torrential flooding, and I think much wake as well. And there's still in recovery mode to some extent, so it was kind of quite relevant. And I think I'm not sure whose idea it was, but I know it was a few people involved, and it was quite last minute. But what I love about Chris is his generosity is quite amazing. And on a personal note, I remember I actually put some money and gave Chris was raising money for firefighters in WA, and I thought, geez, that's a great cause, and I put some money towards that to get a print from Chris. And good old Aussie Post sort of didn't do a very good job. And sort of 6 weeks later, I'm sort of like, Chris, mate, have you seen that print? And it went into the ether somewhere. And not only did Chris send me the image again, he sent me another one. And we're talking a 1 meter wide print as a surprise. And he didn't tell me what it was. And I had to like clear my house to have enough room to open it out to have a look at it because it's so big. And I was like, who the hell does that? But Chris Saunders, like, I know you love printing, and you've got your latest baby in the back there. And I've got some other friends locally that have been doing some printing for you that I'm learning from. But always really appreciate your generosity of spirit, Chris. And your place in the community is so welcome and warm, mate. Love it.
Thanks, Paul. And look, it's probably just a reflection of everything I benefited from, certainly in WA, but increasingly so more in a Australian and global sense. That whole community thing, and everyone is generous in their feedback and and support and how to solve problems and those sorts of things. So I think the more you get exposed to that stuff, it just brings it out in you, and you want to give back what you received. So I was very lucky to be part of a nurturing organization here in the AIPP, and I'm keen to try and keep doing that sort of thing. So we've got actually tomorrow night we've got the over here in WA the TAFE students who always put on a good show. I've got their graduation presentation. I look forward to
which Chris is part of, actually. So congratulations to you as well tonight, Chris, for your graduation tomorrow.
Me?
Oh, you're not graduating? I thought you were studying it as well. No? Okay.
No. I wish I was. I wish I could go back and do something like that. That would be so fantastic to formally to get the formal training and skills. I think would be an absolute privilege to go and study art or something like that and blend that back in. But no, there's the graduation, and then next week I'm off to Rottnest with some of the islands to do a workshop over there with some of the students as well. So really looking
brilliant.
It'd be brilliant.
So
you passed the buck to me, Matt, and you've done your trick of staying quiet in the background.
Flying under the radar.
I'm not going to let him off the hook that easy, mate. So, Chris, how would you? It's probably a little more of a personal question, but how do you find the community over there now? Since have the individuals from the RPP sort of kept together and kept their own sort of sense of community alive? Because like when I went over there to judge, like maybe 8 or 9, 10 years ago, it was one of the strongest communities I've ever seen. And in so many ways. And when you said that sort of nurturing, sort of under the wing aspect, it's almost never been more real, actually, to me than when I went over there and I was just wrapped up in it for a week. It was pretty incredible. How would you describe that community, and how has it sort of evolved or adapted from that change?
Look, I think there was a bit of time out where everyone was trying to, take stock and work out what the best way to move forward was. There was a core group of people who were keen on re-establishing something. So there's now I think it's called Pro Photography WA, I think is the group. And so it's a WA based pro photography organization, really good community that just literally this year got that up and running about 6 months ago. I think membership is going pretty strong, and they're sort of trying to reach out to the old AIPP membership, plus I guess try and understand where there were other parts of WA who weren't that engaged before, try and bring everyone together. And it's not the AIPP, it's literally something new. So yeah, it's really good. We're hopeful, I think, or at least they're hopeful of getting a print competition equivalent of like a state awards again up and running in WA early next year. So fingers crossed, but certainly it's alive and kicking after being on life support for a bit, I guess. Yeah.
Great news, really great news. Yeah,
that's good to hear. So none of you guys have said a word about this trip yet. Ricardo pointed out Matt to talk about it.
Maybe that's a clue, Paul. Just
handballing between each other.
Yeah, we haven't.
I think Matt definitely is. Matt initiated this whole group, so it definitely is Matt's. I think it would be fantastic for Matt to talk to it, but I don't think there's any secret. So yeah, over to Matt.
We haven't been on talking terms since the trip.
This is the first time we've talked.
So my understanding is you guys were meant to have a group meeting tonight, and we couldn't get you on the show because of it. I think, is that right?
Oh, I think we're just going to have our meeting here. Let's get Mieke back and
very good.
Have at
we
it.
were like, oh man, we must just pretty much everyone. We realised we slowly sort of figured it out. But no, I think it was Ricardo said, "Oh no, I'm in a meeting tonight with Matt, Mieke, and Chris." And I was like, "Wait a minute, we already asked Matt, Mieke."
That's very dedicated, Rick.
Hang on, I thought Paul, Nick, and Luke were our guests to our meeting. Is this the other way around?
Feel free to do that, man. Yeah. I'd love to be a guest to someone else's show for a change. I can tell you that. Don't have to worry about organising and all the tech stuff and all the streaming and writing up all the blurbs. It'll be great.
You do that exceptionally well. Whenever I read the emails that come through, I can really sense who wrote the words. It's got your name written all over it.
Oh, Lucky does heaps of them, mate.
Well, he can tell. He's basically saying he can tell the ones that you do. That's what he was saying. That's all right.
Very occasionally you get a good one, and that's mine.
Yeah, I was going to say
something
Nick,
to do with Tasmania. Yeah,
Nick I actually wish Nick would write more of them because he's a
very good
amazing writer. It's like I just write them and I just go, oh. Heck.
You know when the Talking Landscape Photography Facebook page says "Yow" like that. No, it's Paul. You know it's Paul. He's talking. I'm kind of hoping we might tackle something. We might tackle something that you mentioned earlier, Paulie, and that's AI and where this is going. I think we've got a nice panel on here, and I know Matt has tackled this subject on his wonderful channel, Matt Talks Photography. Look it up on YouTube if you haven't already, and like and subscribe. But no, seriously, Matt's got some great videos, and one of the videos he's done is on AI and who's going to lose their job and where that's going, etc. In fact, I think you've done a couple of videos, haven't you, where you've done some painting with words with one of them. Was that the same video? I'm a bit...
I've done a couple. One of them was comparing what the AI could create versus what I had created myself and kind of describing my photo to AI and then seeing what it would come back with.
Yeah, well...
And fortunately, it wasn't too much better.
Just talk... You obviously been looking quite a bit into it, Matt. I don't know if Rick's been looking into it much or anyone else, but it's coming forward very quickly, and it's another one of these disruptive technologies that makes me start to twitch a bit. What are your thoughts on where this is going, Matt? Just briefly.
Well, overall, I think it's exciting because it's just a new technology. It's going to take us to different places that we might not even know exist yet. And at the same time, there's a scary aspect of that, and that is we're training basically a computer software or algorithms and so on to create things based on the work of people that have created things in the past. And I think that's the real scary bit, is when you see so many prompts being created, and that is basically a string of words that's fed to the computer or whatever you want to call it, and then it generates something based on that. And a lot of those prompts come from using artist names and things like that the AI has been trained on to create artwork in certain styles. So there's a lot of debate around, do you own your own style? Is it okay for people to basically appropriate the style of your artwork to create something brand new? It's a big grey area at the moment. But the technology itself is pretty fascinating, and hopefully it'll just be one of those things where we can use it in really good ways and it doesn't get abused too much.
Yeah, well,
it doesn't create situations where people don't have as much need to send people out into the field to get these images, because they can just type in beautiful sunrise at Cradle Mountain Boat Shed Star Trail or something like that, and you don't need a shot like this anymore. So yeah, just that's I've had a bit of a play with it too, and I think I typed in most beautiful photo in the world, which is probably not a very descriptive thing to do, but I can tell you that it certainly didn't provide me that. it was pretty awful.
A self-portrait.
What?
Here's a question, Matt. What do you see as the positive uses for it? What kind of positive place does it hold in the future?
Well, I think
it's very easy to pull apart for the negative, but what's actually the good side of it, I guess?
Well, I don't think we've fully fleshed it out yet, but I'd say one of the good aspects is that it can allow creatives to kind of flesh out concepts before they then go and create those concepts. I think another one is potentially kind of democratizing the image creation and allowing people to create images for themselves. So at the moment, we see, say, a lot of bloggers and people that create their own content, they go to services like Unsplash or, places where they can get free images or very cheap images. And they're now able to potentially create images to go with what else they're creating by using prompts. And I think a lot of the work that's going to be taken away immediately from people is the work that no one was prepared to pay for anyway. And I'm still seeing that there's going to be a big demand for real photography of real people, of real places, and particularly photography that has some sort of art to it as well. There are some generators that are more artistic, so I would say Midjourney is probably a more artistic AI generator. And then you've got something like DALL-E, which is another one of the main players at the moment, and that creates quite literal images that may even have the same flaws in those images that you would see in the training data of those as well. And I think even in my own video, I pointed out it was quite amusing that some of the images had watermarks or signatures kind of created on them because the AI had seen so many things with writing in those positions that it started generating its own watermarks and things as well. But even in just creating a couple of different videos months apart, I saw huge changes even just in that period of time. So I think where we'll be in 5 years is just something that we can barely even predict right now.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing Rick's thought on the topic because of your own conceptual photography type style, Rick. Where do you see your images and AI, and is there any mixing, or is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I'm really interested in your opinion here.
Oh, thanks, Nick. I see it filling many purposes. One that Matt just described, but I still think that there's a place. If anything, I think it's going to amplify the importance of creating more unique and personal and creative work, which is, I think, something that AI will never be able to emulate or replicate, is the way, I guess, our unique vision and how we interpret the world. And I don't think, as good as AI will ever be, will ever really truly portray, or I guess produce an image that is how you intend it to be. So if anything, it'll just further give more weight to creating more creative work, more unique work. I think there will always be a place for that. And for me, it's about the process more than anything, the experience of creating work. And I think for me, I do it more, not so much for the outcome or the end product, but for the journey, the experience and the process of creating a work. And for me, using a tool to create an image in my mind and then straight away have that image, to me, that would be very unsatisfying, unfulfilling experience and process. What's far more fulfilling and satisfying for me is going out into nature, immersing myself in the environment and all the experiences that come with that, and then to be able to create something yourself and put a lot of work and time and effort into it. That for me is far more satisfying, and I think that'll always be the case. It's a bit like a bit like running a marathon. Well, not a great analogy, but running a marathon and someone saying, "Hey, I could get you from start to finish in this." Let's call it a hoverboard, because I'm just trying to make this up as I go. And you can get there in 10 minutes versus running the entire thing. I think there's a greater sense of accomplishment and achievement knowing that you've earned it. A terrible analogy.
No, that's a good analogy. And another thing I'm really fascinated with is it's almost a mix of genres of writing and photography, or creativity, visual creativity in melding into one. Because from the videos I've seen on it, I haven't tried it myself because, quite frankly, it doesn't really interest me from my own point of view to actually create stuff. But the actual what is coming out is very interesting to me because it is another disruptive technology, and I'm very keen to see how it goes. But it appears that there, and I guess it changes depending on which AI generator you're using, but there appears to be a lot of skill in the text inputs as to what you get from the output, and I can see it being a real sort of, those that like to dabble in wordsmiths entering it in and then creating something out of their own poetry or their own the words they have going through their head. I mean, we at the moment we see obviously graphic design combined with photography, words literally on a page with photos, but this is sort of like a back end input, and it's really interesting and fascinating to see.
I'm sure you'd much prefer to be behind a camera in the forest rather than be trying to dabble with combinations of different symbols and words to try and create something. Yeah,
personally, for me absolutely, and I don't get any real buzz with the idea of AI whatsoever. In fact, there's a lot of AI issues that we know of, particularly with video. And the potential it has to fake stuff that has to create conflicts and political issues and a lot of distress with fake porn and that sort of thing as well. And so there are a lot of negatives, and there are definitely a lot of negatives with the photographic side of it as well. But it's good to see the positive aspects being put forward by you and Matt. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I see this as almost as big as the transition of film into digital, although obviously no one's going to, the whole world of photography is not going to suddenly just do AI, but the Photoshop versus no Photoshop sort of debate, I consider it's going to be that big. I think it's, in the industry, it'll be talked about in the same sort of manner that those sort of debates were 15, 20 years ago.
I think Matt wants to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to come back to what Rick was saying about that 10-minute versus multiple-hour journey. And I'd probably say that the designer in me that's working commercially, it wants the 10-minute journey, whereas the artist wants the experience in the hour journey. So I think, and probably Douwe can talk to this as well. I don't know him personally, but I'm aware that he has a design background. I think there's some pretty exciting applications in that regard. And personally, I think it's probably the biggest shift that we've seen since design was put on computers rather than drawing and cutting out things. So yeah, it's been massive.
Sorry to interrupt, Matt.
I was going to ask Dex about this.
AI come across what you've been doing at all, or is it still very straight up like Illustrator and all of that kind of thing in design? Maybe we've caught him off guard.
Yeah, Dex, we'd love to hear your thoughts, Dex. I don't know, I think his screen's frozen, but
it's all good. Yep.
Dex works daily.
Is there?
the high end sort of professional realm of of downtown Sydney, and sort of I can imagine that I'm wondering if you put any thought in, Dix, about how you see its role and your capacity as a designer, and where you may be asked, or where you could see maybe its positive potential for the kind of work that you do.
Well, all I can say is that I use as a vehicle to create, for example, a book where the image is the hero. So I don't want to be over designing what I do. And I think books, the images should speak for themselves. That's my mantra when I design books. And the images are always the hero. So I don't want any over-designed elements of the week on the page, because the image is the hero. And I say that to a lot of people all the time. That's the most important for me as a designer. And what sort of program I'm using, doesn't really matter. The image is always the hero, and the story and the narrative of the images.
But you could argue that narrative, that story can come through with somebody's idea that they feed through in textural words to create the image that you're then using. So do you feel like a really strong discernment between an image that's created virtually as opposed to literally?
Now, if it's a conceptual image, I always like to see that mentioned in the caption, or so people can see that it is a conceptual image. And there's always a message or a narrative with any image. It doesn't matter how it is created. So I think the visual part is important, but what it actually tells, the story, is more important. It's nice that an image looks beautiful, but the image narrative or story is more important.
Tom, do you have any thoughts, Mr. Wrate? I'm putting you on the spot there by jumping out, but we haven't heard of you for a little while, and you might have put some thought into that.
I have put the quantum sum of zero thought into AI.
Fresh eyes.
I've never typed in Midjourney or any of the alternatives into my browser bar online.
Oh, I haven't either.
But you know what? What Rick said earlier really hit a home run for me. Is the reason why I'm so passionate about landscape photography, the reason why I'm in landscape photography is not the outcome, but it's the journey. And if there's a way, and I certainly appreciate what Matt's saying around from the professional capacity of a graphic designer, where efficiency is often key. But no one's ever going to take a camera out of my hand, because it's my way of interpreting the world. And I don't think I would be able to do that by putting, zeros and dots or any sort of code together, combination of words. It needs to be intuitive, it needs to be reactive, and it needs to be tactile. And that's why I just love having a camera in my hand.
But you're also not the creator then either. Like, you're taking the whole creation process away, or you're distilling down as to a search string, isn't it?
I guess some people would find creativity in putting different combinations of certain things together. So I'm sure someone would probably agree to disagree with you there, Luke. But it's my creative journey is personal to me, and the way I go about my creative journey is searching for compositions in the landscape that appeal to me. I don't get that creative rush sitting behind a computer screen, but I know certain people do.
With the research you've done on it, Matt, how does the ownership work? Is it you've got a subscription to these AI generators, so whatever it spits out is yours to keep, kind of thing?
It depends on your subscription and the service, but some of the services allow you to use them commercially to a certain extent. If you use it beyond that extent, you might have to upgrade your subscription. And it's something that's been used extensively in NFTs, which is its own kind of rabbit hole to jump down. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of them these days.
Yeah, that was my next question. Like, where does that sit relative? Because that was sort of, a year ago, sort of all the kind of, well, there was a huge amount of focus on that. Is that still growing and continuing exponentially? Are people backing away from that, do you think? Or where do you see the role of NFTs?
There's lost a huge amount of value in crypto, so I think that's definitely taken the shine off.
But is it
Yeah.
still a significant place moving forward in the future, do you think?
I'd say it's a amazing technology and potential that's been very poorly managed and utilized, and fallen into the same traps of the technologies and environments that it was supposed to, it was the promised land that we were meant to progress to, but instead it's just been taken over by the same people and the same problems that were with other currencies or other communities.
That's very diplomatic of you, mate. It's a load of shit.
I was just going to suggest that maybe next year we do a show on the variations of where the future's heading, and be it AI, NFT, other things we haven't heard of yet, 3-dimensional sort of based photography. I'd be quite interested in that. And one of the things that we discussed before the show is maybe before we wrap up, would be ideas for guests or concepts or things that we might explore next year. If anybody has any particular kind of ideas, and this is quite an interesting realm, and I think we've only just scratched the surface on it at the very least. AI, I think, is going to have a huge place, and commercially, especially, I think, in terms of its application, and where the integrity and authenticity of creative ownership comes in there is going to be quite a big conversation, I think. But yeah, like this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but we're coming up to 9:30 already, so I'll jump ahead. Like, do you guys have any particular sort of ideas that you'd love to see us kind of maybe explore on the show, or any particular guests we haven't had yet, or concepts that be worth sort of looking into, or ideas for the future? We're all ears, actually, because we've hit the 100, and we sort of want to have a bit of a fresh start and have a bit of rethink over summer and take a bit of a break and maybe see sort of how we want to pivot and maybe move forward in a slightly different way, maybe. But yeah, love to get your feedback on that, guys.
Well, I'll jump in with my 2 cents. I don't know how everyone else feels, but first of all, I think you're doing a fantastic job already. And one of my favorite episodes that you've done, probably in the last year, hopefully it was in the last year, was Samuel Markham talking about his bushfire experiences and sharing that photography. And I feel like that episode took the viewers and myself, even though I've taken bushfire photography, but takes us to a place that we wouldn't otherwise be in or experience in that way. So I think if you can continue sharing stories and photographers that can take us to different places or share really different experiences, then you'll continue on to be on a winner.
The thing that I find curious about the show that you guys have created, or perhaps the greatest benefit of the show that you guys have created, is most long-form discussions on photography live in podcasts. So it's completely audio. And what I find really beneficial of being able to sit here with you guys is the ability to bring up visual prompts and actually talk to images. So long live talking landscape photography, as far as I'm concerned.
We've discussed, should we have a podcast or put an audio version out, but we just don't want to have to consider, we're just looking at a photo now and we're just like admiring this one and that one, like how you represent that through audio is just not possible. So it certainly makes a big difference in terms of perhaps the reach you can have, but it's still valuable conversations that need to, that should be had. And we're creating an amazing record that people can look back on with all these interesting people and for time to come. So that's a very pleasing thing to be part of.
Yeah, it's almost like a fireside chat with friends, whereby, you can engage with someone online, you can look at them, but not only that, I think the main thing here is that you can talk to the images, and that's what we're all here for.
Well, I mean, it's not rocket science that we might have had a much sort of broader following and more numbers behind the board if we created a bite-sized chunks to the show, like 20-minute slots like most everyone else does. And we've discussed it at length, and we're still discussing it to the future next year about length. And I think it's kind of naturally we pulled it back a little bit from some of the earlier shows that were like 3.5 hours. But it's really been quite fascinating just how natural the length of time seems to have fallen into the time slot that it has in the last couple of years. And even though it's quite long, and I think it suits retired people more, or it doesn't suit people that are interested in the younger generation of bite-sized chunks. So, and we're kind of present to that, but at the same time, it's so enjoyable to have a And even Renee actually reminded us last on the last show, like it's so rare to have quite a large amount of real space for an artist to really delve into their process and to be really transparent and open. Like Sam's show, like I'll never forget how visceral I felt like I was bloody there by the end of that show, and my camera was melting in my hand, and I couldn't see, and I was choking on smoke, and my family was bloody thinking we were going to lose the house. It was incredible.
Yeah, I love Matt's idea of having more, trying to incorporate more of that experience-based landscape photography into the show somehow, because I completely agree, and I think that's a great idea, Matt. So thanks for that. That sort of brought an idea that wasn't otherwise to the fore. So I'll be thinking about that a lot in the new year. So thanks for that.
Yeah, we're definitely going to take some time. We're going to be on a break until February, and I'm going to be traveling abroad and have a bit of time, hopefully, to think to myself. I don't know if there will be much of that, but it certainly will be nice to come back with a refreshed vision and kind of maybe get a little bit more. I don't think we'll change too much, but just be a bit more honed in on what we're trying to achieve with the show is probably the more more pertinent thing to do there. Yeah,
it is a long break, but one necessary because particularly Luke and Paul have got plans in place and are going to be away, so it's going to be very difficult to sort of get Luke in from 50 degrees south on the southern seas.
But there's no reception for a month, so there's just nothing I'm going to be able to do.
Yeah.
Well,
so
as Luke reminded, it's a very, very natural place to take a pause. It's the 100th show. And that is quite a significant milestone. There's probably not many people out there, bar like someone like Matt Payne, who's done, I don't know, 300 or something. Of multiple hours. It is a significant thing, and I think if anything, it's going to fill the tanks a little bit. But it is a good opportunity to get feedback from people we respect, like you guys. And I personally am quite open to getting feedback from the audience over that time. Like if people feel really strongly about particular guests they want to get on, or certain concepts they want fleshed out, or different skill sets that we might be able to reach out and find an expert at, then
I think what we should do is send out a survey like we did that other time too to our mailing list as well. I think it'd be good.
Probably not a bad idea. Yep.
Chris just called us Centurions. Thanks, mate.
And
he was asking if there was a correlation between beards and landscape photographers.
I'll have to do an episode on that. I think that's a very thoughtful kind of episode to have.
Ricardo's got the designer beard.
How many photographers wear hiking clothes?
Anyone else want to speak to, like, put a little bit of voice in terms of what any feedback on the show or what they might want to see in the future?
I can chip in just quickly, and I can further echo what Matt said about trying to get invite more photographers that have more environmentalism ethos to their work, and photographers who quote unquote create less beautiful work by photographing the ugly truth of the impact that our human industrialized processes are having on our earth. And so I'm aware of photographers, particularly aerial photographers, that rather than photographing what's incredibly beautiful about our world, they're photographing, I guess, the ugly truth about which a lot of our photographers that you've invited in our community are doing that through, I guess, earth extracting processes. But I'm talking more about deforestation, about pollution in our oceans, I guess oil runoff, that sort of impact, and documenting that, even just things like what Matt's done in the past of photographing roadkill and just how incredibly bad that is in Tasmania and how many of our native wildlife we're losing, and just photographing what's, like I said, quote unquote, less beautiful, but it has a lot of substance.
Absolutely. Yep, completely.
Yeah, so maybe reaching out in some of the more uncomfortable realms that still have their own power. Yeah, I think you kind of, what did you say?
Light and shade, yeah.
Uncomfortable truths, I guess, is another way. I mean, that could be an interesting show in itself.
I think that's a documentary, isn't it?
What's that?
I think that's a documentary.
The climate change one, I think, wasn't it?
That was by the guy that didn't win the presidency, wasn't it?
Inconvenient Truth.
Al Gore.
Inconvenient Truth. That's right. Yeah, that was a pretty bold, powerful film in its time, and it's still very relevant, I think. Dex, have you got any feedback for us, mate? Up against the girls on, like, what do you?
I think it would be nice to hear from young talent. And when you were asking the question, maybe it's a nice thing to go to a school in Hobart and ask kids how they see the environment, the landscape, and ask them to photograph it. Because the younger generation is now growing up with climate change. And when we were growing up, that wasn't really an issue. And now all of a sudden there's a whole new generation that has to pay for all of that. So it would be nice to see their sort of take on what is happening in their world and the world they are going to grow older in. So maybe it's a nice perspective to hear from those kids, and maybe they can sort of illustrate their words with images of nature around them and how that impacts them.
That's an interesting concept. I like it.
Definitely. It would be nice to do some infield components like that, where we can actually go out and interview people, and then cut to that, which is a concept I'm sort of looking at doing myself in some of my own projects as well. So certainly would be nice to incorporate some of those elements into the show. Just always a balancing act in terms of how much time you have for your own things versus the show, and it's always a bit of a weighing things up exercise with that.
One of the reasons we're still here is because of the structural design of the show. Once we set it up, is it doesn't have a huge, we pressed end on the end of the show, and it just goes straight up to YouTube and job's done. So
yeah, you'll start playing and Paul will be like 10 seconds, and then you'll watch that all go through. The next
it's
time
made
you
it
watch
sustainable by not committing to a huge aspect of post production and other sorts of things, and that's been
exactly why it's sustainable. It's the only reason it's sustainable.
yeah. So we're trying to keep that in mind, but also be open to the future. One idea Luke and I were discussing is about maybe creating an aspect of the show that is a little bit more of a snapshot, and a little bit more sort of hit and run and impactful, that we potentially apply to most guests, and maybe present that as a smaller pocket size aspect of a show. So people that want to engage in a longer show could maybe have something short, a bit more impactful to engage with.
Sized,
like a bite size, because we're quite aware, that to really grow numbers wise, and that's again not why we're doing this show, but it's relevant to the amount of time and effort you put in, and that's kind of the only feedback you get really is the numbers on a screen, but and that is quite relevant to the length, and I think Tim and I have had a few discussions about that too. So maybe we can find a way to appeal to a broader audience in that regard by figuring out a way to compartmentalize things a little bit, maybe.
We'd still have the long form chat. We'd just
actually
trim out bits for and repurpose for more shorter form, so that you've got best of both worlds.
Really open to feedback about that, guys. I know Tim has said a few times he really wants the show to grow, and that maybe being shorter is an advantage. So if you've got any ideas around that, Tim, that are really practically applicable, that'd be really cool.
First of all, I understand the desire for continuous improvement, and you guys are asking each other the right questions. But I also want you guys to take the opportunity to pat each other on the back and say congratulations. This is a significant milestone. Everyone here on the panel has got a lot out of it. Even the shows that we haven't partaken in, I've kind of sat here watching live shows many, many times across the last 3 years. So before we go down a rabbit's hole of what ifs and, let's make this better or that better, please take the opportunity to sit down with one another, have a beer and say, guys, we did it. This is a massive milestone.
Cheers to that.
Don't
King Island, Paulie. We'll kick back.
Luke and I. We're gonna get straight off this, do 6 hours editing and pack my bags to head off to King Island in the morning, which is why the show's on Tuesday night, not Wednesday.
We are planning to keep it still to the same night, just so you're aware in the future. It's just an extreme one-off.
Tomorrow night, clink of the glass, and we'll maybe FaceTime, or if we can FaceTime Nick in. It's I think it's pretty appropriate.
What you've done has been really selfless. You've resisted monetizing the show for a long time now.
True.
You've dedicated a significant number of hours towards building the show. But don't lose sight of the community that you've built has been just, really a lot of depth to it. I've taken a lot of enjoyment out of building my relationships with you guys over the past few years. And so from us, thank you. And if you want to talk about improvement, then let's take it offline, and I'm happy to give you some feedback.
Yeah, no, appreciate that, Tim. And it's definitely nice to be able to stop the mind ticking and just appreciate the work that's happened, and all of the amazing people that tune in to watch. And we really just I love the fact that we're connecting people and helping people learn about all these other amazing photographers, but also other photographers getting to know each other as well. And if we can just like you were saying, help to create that community and link people together, it's always a really fantastic thing to be able to do. So
and it creates a legacy of an archive of particular photographers and ideas at this point in time in their lives in 2021, 2020, 2022, where the opinions were such and such. And they're going to remain. I think YouTube's here to stay, and they're going to remain there. And so when someone types Tim Wrate into a search engine, or Ricardo de Cunha, or Matt Palmer, or anyone really, they're going to get an insight into their lives at that time, and it may well be the only online in-depth interview you get for that person and their ideas and their concepts. And it might be that this is a historical document, and it's been my wish from the start that we think about that when we do these shows, that it is likely to be a historical document, and I think that's part of our contribution with the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me of that, Nick. I remember you saying that quite a while ago, but it's been a while since I sort of had that in my head. And that is significant, especially people that might not be with us that much longer. I think, it was very significant having Steve Parrish on the show, and it took a while to set up. And, the depth of insight we had into his character and his life was really, really quite profound, I thought.
Yep.
No, that was a very special episode for me, and I'd love to have him back on. Actually.
He's almost left the world a few times already, so I hope he's here for a long time. But,
yeah. We're not wishing you anything, Steve. We know you've had your issues, but absolutely. That was a special show, and that show. That really was a podcast, nearly, because I don't think we saw any of Steve's work, but
it was amazing.
We were transfixed during that show, and listening to what he's been through, where he's gone, what his philosophies have been, where they are now, etc. Amazing show, and definitely one of my favourites as well. That show, but I guess, and I'm sure Luke was about to say this, but every guest that we've had. It's been an absolute privilege to have you on the show, and you are what has made the show by agreeing to come on and give up your time. And every show has been wonderful, regardless of whether we've mentioned you personally or had you on tonight or not. We thank you so much for your efforts, and bringing your presentations and thoughts and ideas, and it's been terrific. But I'll let you close her out, Luke, I reckon.
Yes.
Before we do that,
yes.
we haven't actually mentioned our most prolific member on the show, and that was Tom Putt.
Oh, yes, true. Very much.
He's literally, I think, 4 or 5 times, he's come on, and pretty much every single time we've asked him, he's gone out of his way to come on, whether he's in the back of his car, in the car park, in the back of what or wherever. He's always done it, and just really wanted to acknowledge him for his huge contribution to the show over the years, very consistently over a long period of time, and we really appreciate you, brother. Thank you very much, and we're looking forward to having you on again.
We nearly got him on, but he double booked himself or with us because he thought we're on Wednesday rather than Tuesday. So
I think he's just so keen to come on that he just said yes without checking the date properly, so but that's all good. So I'm sure we'll see him again next year back on the show. So
absolutely, no doubt.
Yeah, so at this point in time, the first show next year will be in early February. We may change things around there, but that's what we're looking at the moment. And I don't think we have any plans to change the actual day of the week or the frequency at this point. So that's the current viewpoint. But we've got a bit of time to think and reflect, and as you've just seen now. And we'll come back and we're very keen, I'm sure, to be coming back to you, and I'll have a couple big adventures under my belt to talk about, no doubt, as well. So as we all will over the Christmas break. So that'll be great. Thanks so much to all of you guys joining us on the panel tonight. Dex, thank you so much again.
Yeah, could have done it without you, Dex.
Just unbelievable how supportive you are.
Yeah.
Quite a privilege to have you as a friend, I have to say. So and to all of you other guys, Rick, Chris, Matt, and Tim, thanks for joining. Mieke and the other Tim as well, thanks for tonight. It's been brilliant. And we just before we wrap up, we do have one place left on our Tarkine workshop that we're running next year in February. So if you would like to join us, we unfortunately had a cancellation due to a family illness. So if you'd like to join us in the Tarkine, just check out my website,
Luke.Sharkey.com/workshops.
And we do have one place for that. So it would be really nice to fill that one. Other than that, we'll leave you to it for a period of time. There's plenty of episodes to watch if you haven't watched them all. So there's plenty to do there to keep yourself entertained while we're away.
Yeah, and feel free to share that around, with people that may be interested in the show. And that whole like and subscribe thing, it's not just it actually is significantly helpful for the show. So making an extra effort to push those buttons and engage with the show really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And just have an amazing break, and feel free to get in touch if you've got any feedback for us as we've discussed tonight. And we will send out a little survey if you're on our mailing list as well, just for tips for next year. But let's celebrate 100. Thanks for joining us for all those shows, and have a lovely evening. Until next time, catch you later, everybody.
All right, well done, everyone.
Stay safe out there.
Yeah.